We are delighted to welcome Fiona English to Ink and Insights, a keynote speaker, thought leader, and coach. Fiona specializes in purpose, leadership, and human potential. With 2 decades of experience in global investment markets, she brings a rare ability to bridge the worlds of business and personal transformation, seeing purpose and leadership not just as what we do, but as who we are. Recognized as a contemporary thinker and inspiring voice, Fiona was one of only 50 women worldwide selected in 2015 for the prestigious W50 program at UCLA, California, designed to cultivate the next generation of global women leaders. She has since delivered talks across more than 30 countries, was a semi finalist in the Nordic Business Forum Global Speaking Contest, and in 2025 was shortlisted for Best Thought Leader of the Year speaker at the Speaker Awards in London. Her presence on Ink and Insights promises a conversation that will challenge, inspire, and illuminate the deeper dimensions of leadership and identity. Fiona, welcome to Ink and Insights with Sumit Sarma Samir.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope I live up to that introduction.
Fiona, you often say purpose is not just what we do, but who we are. How did that insight first crystallize for you?
That's a great question. I think partly out of my own journey, and also out of my own research. So, like anything in life, and I think a lot of keynote speakers and writers will say that, their own life dictates their own struggle to make something real, and their life dictates what they have to say about it. I realized when I suppose so, a little bit of background for your listeners. I had worked in global investment for about 20 years, and in 2017 I resigned. And I had this insight that I was supposed to be doing something different, and I was supposed to be of more impact in the world. But being completely honest, in 2017, I had no clue what that looked like. So I had to go off and really think about what that was. And as I was walking this path towards what I wanted to be, which was have greater purpose in my life, be of greater impact, I hit off every resistance and every block in myself. The idea crystallized in my head around what I wanted to do. But then, of course, you have to overcome your own fear. You have to overcome your own inner critic. You have to overcome what you believe other people will think of that. And what I realized is if we want to make purpose real, we have to become the people capable of making purpose real. So often when I speak to people, whether that's from the stage or whether I'm working with leaders directly, I say to them is that you're here seeking more purpose. You want to become more purposeful, which means that there is a gap between what you're doing today and what you want to do in the future. And you
Right.
have to cross that gap. So for me, it is about, we have to express ourselves more fully. And to do that, we have to get over the reasons that we're not doing that in the first place. So I think that putting it around identity stops us thinking about, there's a lot of find your purpose. It is outside of you, go and find it in the world. And it's not, it's inside you. And for whatever reason, it hasn't come into full bloom yet. And I think that stops it being about we can control something externally. We can't. We can control something internally. And if there's an impact we want to have in the world, we have to start there. And I think that that's a mistake that a lot of people and companies make, that they talk about what they will do, but the real question is, who will you be? So I
Right.
suppose that's a short version of how did I come up with that idea, and it has been based out of my own research and then my own realization that I was going to have to overcome some of these things myself.
Right, right. Fiona, with 20 years in global investment markets, what lessons from finance still shape how you think about human potential today?
What a great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. I've seen them as two very different fields. Um, what lessons about human potential? I think it's a very competitive place to be in investment markets, and I really enjoyed it for a number of reasons. One, it really pushed me in terms of, to be the best version of myself that I could be within that environment, because, you're working with and competing with very clever people who are very driven. Um,
Mm,
and I think that, it is a lesson that, you need to be around people who share your ambition, to unlock your own potential. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, and I wouldn't actually put this just about finance, I think this is true of most professional services and a lot of industries, is it can make you a very linear version of yourself. So the positive of being in environments like that is it really pushes you. The negative of being in environments like that is that it encourages you to focus on one stream of yourself, if you like. And I think that one of the lessons I've learned is that when I've stepped out and I've explored other facets of my personality and my identity, was that it has expanded who I was. Where to
Right.
continue in on the track I was on in there, which is not to say that that was anybody else's fault, but I was buying into this linear version of myself where if I focus on these things which are rewarded in this environment, then I will succeed. And it was true, I did succeed, and I would have continued to succeed. I think that that dilutes purpose, So, and often to be very purposeful, we have to be slightly maverick. We have to decide we're willing to break the rules, we're willing to do things a little bit differently. So we have to be willing to use those environments to, help us achieve our potential, while also realizing that to really be purposeful and hit our potential and be ambitious, that sometimes we have to expand what is currently, the status quo or what is allowed within those environments.
Right, right. And what's the biggest misconception people have about purpose-driven leadership?
I think people think that they can, particularly when it comes to leaders within business, that, let's say I'm the CEO of a big company and we've written a purpose statement. And, now we have this shiny purpose statement and everybody knows what our purpose is, but I just continue to be over here leading the way I was before. Now, that's just not the way it goes. Purpose is inherently human. So any company can have a purpose statement, but it is the leaders of that organization that will breathe life into that statement. So
Right.
it's back to what I was saying before about, you can write all the statements that you want, but are you willing to be the leader that makes that real? And what that will challenge you to do is get clarity on who you are and what you stand for, and to be willing to make the hard choices when that moment arrives. Because purpose will always ask you at some point to, be in conflict with what others consider success to be. It will always ask you to make a choice at some point that, is outside of what is considered business as usual, if you like. So I think that that is the point. It's how much will you risk yourself to make what you say is purpose in your life or your business real.
Can you share a moment when living your purpose felt most challenging, and how did you navigate it?
Wow. I mean, there's been so many moments for me, and I was naive when I started this. I didn't realize it would challenge me as much as it did. But it has really challenged me to be very visible and very public about what I believe, in a way that I didn't expect, and I don't think I was prepared for. So, I mean, I always had a very visible role, if you like. So, I was the investment director for our equity desk. And what that means is I was effectively head of investor relations. So, my job was I spent a lot of time out pitching to clients on stages, speaking. So, I had a very visible role, if you like. The difference between that and what I do now is I can't go out into the world and ask other leaders to be clear about who they are and what they stand for unless I'm willing to do that myself. And that was
Right.
very exposing for me. And I'm actually, I would say I was quite a private person, so I was quite happy having, a public persona in my workplace. And then I would retreat back to quite
Were
a
you?
private.
No one is going to believe that you are a quiet person sometime at some point of
I
time.
know, I know. And I still have that in my personality where I go out and I speak and then I retreat back to long walks on my own on the beach. But I
Right.
need to challenge myself to say, if you are saying that we have to be clear and visible about what we believe, then you have to do it yourself, Fiona. And it was quite challenging for me because it made me feel slightly unsafe because I was saying things that challenged the status quo. And of course, when you do that, not everybody is going to agree with you. Not everybody is going to say, oh, well, I would definitely want to deal with her. You can polarize some people in your opinions. And I think being purposeful is about saying, well, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is the impact I want to have. And I'm willing to risk myself for that. But I had to take my own medicine, so I had to be willing to be the person to do that. And it was very, very challenging for me.
Right, right. Fiona, being one of 50 women selected for UCLA's W50 program must have been
Mhm.
transformative for you. What stayed with you most from that experience?
I think I was at a stage in my life, so it was in 2015, so just over 10 years ago. And at that point, I was like 36, I'm 46 now. So, and it was a moment in time where a colleague of mine, and I'm very thankful for her, said to me, "You should apply for this." And I thought, would I even get on it? And I applied and I did. And I spent, it was a 3-month program and we spent a week in UCLA. And I think I sat there and I met really impressive women on it that I'm still in contact with today. But I sat there and I thought, oh, yeah, I can hold my own in this room, actually. So any notions about, oh, I just felt like I was with a peer group in that room. So, they were very impressive. But I thought, I can hold my own in this room. And that program still runs today. So any women listening, you should look it up and apply if you feel called to. But it definitely made me kind of elevate my sense of self to say, you were good enough to be picked for this. And when you were in this room with these people, these were your peer group. So I think in terms of my own confidence, it probably made me think of myself slightly differently.
Right, right. You have spoken in over 30 countries. Which audience surprised you the most and why?
Wow. I don't know. Sometimes we can bring our preconceptions to an audience, and often that is about our own fears. Going back to what I was saying, I remember the
Right.
first time I spoke on purpose, I was really nervous, and it surprised me how nervous I was because I was so used to being on stage. I had done it my whole career. And I think I was projecting my own fear onto the audience that, my ideas will not be well received or they will be cynical about purpose, which is something I talk about in my speeches, that we can be cynical about purpose, and it's in
Mhm.
every audience. But I think what surprised me was that actually this was my internal narrative. And when I spoke to these 200 business leaders, that they, a lot of them come up to me afterwards going, I had hit the nail on the head. They had really received it well. And I thought, this is so, in answering the question kind of backwards, what surprised me was how much I was aligned with them in terms of what I believed purpose was and the responsibility I feel that leaders have to make it real, and how much I was projecting my own fears that they wouldn't buy into my message. And I think that was a big learning for me, just in terms of just to open your own. We do spend a lot of our lives projecting what we think onto the world and what the world will accept from us. We worry about that, but that's all our own stuff, and that's for us to work through.
Right, right.
But
And in
when I
2025,
Sorry, I was just going to say one more thing. What I find about audiences around the world, and I've always found this, is we have more in common than we have a difference. So you can expect an audience in Spain or an audience in Asia to be different to an audience in the UK. But actually, the reality I find is no, we have more together. We have more things in common than we have apart.
yeah, I think, at the core, fundamentally, we are one and the same.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Fiona, in 2025, you're also shortlisted for Best Thought Leader of the Year. And how do
Mhm.
you personally measure impact beyond awards?
So I think awards are nice and they're nice to be recognized, and nice to be recognized by your peer group as well. But for me, my impact is, so I don't take away from the fact that I was really privileged to be shortlisted. But for me, impact for me is, do people action what I say when I'm on stage? So I can win
Right.
all the awards or be shortlisted, for example, but really what needs to happen is that, or what I wish would happen is that my work will influence you, regardless of whether you come across me as a coach, or whether you read something I write, or whether you hear me on stage, that it will inspire you to think about your life, your work, your business, and the changes that you can make to make purpose real in your life.
Right. Right. And how do cultural differences, shape the way people engage with the ideas of purpose and leadership?
I think the big difference, I think, and something I would really like to dismiss, is if we look at, and I'm not praising on labels that kind of differentiate us, but I'm going to use one which is widely used now, which is kind of West and East, if you like. I think
Mhm.
in let's call it the West, which I don't like it, but to simplify it, let's use it for today. Purpose is quite individualistic. So it's very, find your purpose, find what you want to do. And I would say that purpose is an act of service. And I think that Eastern cultures, tend to embody this better. That purpose is not about you; it's about the collective. And that is something that I try to speak to leaders about as well. That really, what I'm trying to do is, can I help you get out of your own way? not so you have more purpose, so you act in a way of service to make purpose real in a way that is collectively useful for other people. So going back to you asked me what's my definition of impact, it's how can I be of impact, how can I inspire other people to help them make purpose real in their life, and for them to be of service for other people. It's that ripple effect that goes out, but it's not just about me and whether I won an award. So I think that idea of find your purpose is too individualistic for me. And I think that why we're all looking for purpose is we're all looking to be significant. And the way to be significant is to be of service to other people, to the collective, to the world. And I think that that's something that our society in general has got very, very, very wrong.
तिमीसँग अब धेरै टाइम छैन है, बिहे गर्नु छ भने गरिहाल, नत्र घरबाट मलाई अन्तै बिहे गरिदिनु।
भर्खर 3 वर्ष भयो एमबीबीएस जोइन गरेको, 5 वर्षको कोर्स हो। के भो? अचम्म छ। एक्सक्यूज मी सर, सर मेरो 5 वर्षको कोर्स 3 वर्षमा सकाउन मिल्दैन?
गेट आउट।
हेलो,
के सोच्यौ त?
के सोच्ने? मैले प्रिन्सिपलसँग पनि कुरा गरिसके। 3 वर्षमा पनि के हुन्छ? के हुन्छ 3 वर्षमा?
के भयो भाइ? ल बस। साउजी एक कप चिया। कसले भन्यो 3 वर्षमा केही हुँदैन भनेर? यो हेर, एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजनामा 3 वर्षमा पैसा फिर्ता हुन्छ।
ए हो र?
जीवन बीमाको साथमा धनवृष्टि 3 वर्षमा एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजना। एलआईसी नेपाल।
No, that's very, very kind of powerful statement you just made, Fiona. I mean, it's kind of also the process of investigating yourself from within and trying to find out the purpose of who you are, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I often say that most of my work is about identity. You know, the question I'm always asking myself and others is, who are you and how do you want to show up in the world? And that's not actually about you. It's about understanding all the reasons that you're not in service already. And to really investigate who you want to be and take the steps again to close the gap between who you are and how you're acting today, and what's that behavior that you are exposing, and then what do you want that to look like in the future. And if I can just add, I think our world desperately needs that today. It needs us to feel that call to be in service to our collective future.
Right, right. So Fiona, if leadership is identity made real, then how would you describe the identity crisis of our times?
I think that we are a society in flux. I say it globally, and obviously then there's differences within cultures. And there is the rules of the game as we have been playing them have shifted and have changed. And I think for a lot of people, you know, we grow up and we go to school and we go to college and we get a job and we're playing the rules of the game. And often what happens is then we get to midlife and something unfolds within us, which is certainly what happened to me, where I was playing the rules of the game. I was successful as society would define it, and I was moving up the ladder of life as it. So there's a clear identity path there, if you like.
Right.
And I often say that I'm very textbook. So I got to 38 and all of a sudden I wanted more. And I didn't want more money. I didn't want more status. I wanted to be more of who I could be, and I wanted to have a greater impact. So it's really the midlife calling for greater meaning and purpose. So I think that can happen even within the kind of the normal, structure that society provides for us. What's happening at the moment, or has been happening probably in the last 15 to 20 years, is the rules of the game are changing, and that's happening quite dramatically across the world. And within that, we lose our anchor of if we're kind of following the paths that society has set out for us, we feel that sense of identity. I know what I'm doing, and I know where I fit in. And what is happening currently is that the rules of the game have basically fallen away. We're living in this era of chaos and uncertainty, and that anchor of who you are in a defined society and a defined game is gone. So the only way you can find that anchor again is to start investigating, well, who am I? Because then I find that anchor, if there's chaos outside, I find that anchor inside myself. So I think that call of identity and the onus on us to reclaim the power we have around our own identity, who are you and how do you want to show up in the world, has been kind of taken away from us. Those guardrails that society has usually provided has fallen away. And the only real choice we have is to try and go internally and to find that. Otherwise, we just get pulled into the tribal wars that we're experiencing globally, which, it's just another way of fixing our desire for certainty to what somebody else thinks. Where really what we need to do is to go back inside and investigate, where is my inner anchor? And what do I know to be true? And who do I know myself to be, regardless of the chaos that is in the world outside?
Right, Fiona. I think time to take a pause, time to be more reflective, time to, soul source is, I think, more important than ever these days.
Yeah, and when I work one-to-one with coaching business leaders, I say to them that this is more important than anything else. We can talk about strategy, that's no problem, but understanding and managing self, again, defines the action that you will have in the world. So having that anchor and having that deep reflective space, for me, contemplative practice has to be part of your life. And whether that's walking alone on the beach as I do, or whether that's meditating, you have to find a place of peace in your life where you can get that clarity. There's so much noise and so much hate and so much distraction in the world right now that your real power lies in, who am I and how do I want to show up in the world, and how do I find that inner peace, or even that just that moment of peace in the day. So I have that clarity and I'm acting from that place, not what the world is telling me to do.
Right, right. Fiona, what's a question you wish audiences asked you more often, but they rarely do?
I think that they don't ask me what's the first step. So we often know what we want the end goal to be, but we're
Right.
afraid of how small the first step is. And I think that I answered it in the last question as well. And we're also afraid of how still the first step is. Because we're all in this rush to, action purpose. We want the outcome, we want to be a published author, or we want to, be the person who has done something of significance. But the first step of that, and certainly this was true in my own life, was to cultivate stillness. And I think that scares us because we're like, no, I want the action part. I want the 10-point plan for how I make purpose real. But purpose is so unique that you have to cultivate time and stillness to really access who you are and to make choices from that place. And I think that really scares us. We're afraid to be deeper in the well. We're afraid to do deeper work. But purpose comes out of that part of ourselves. And often we're afraid to slow down. So I think people often ask me, how can I get to my destination? But what I'm interested in often is, can you stop still long enough to get some clarity about what's wrong with your current place, So when I think that we never, we're often afraid that stillness, it's not that it will tell us what we want, it will tell us what we have that we don't want, So, and we're often afraid of that. And certainly I was afraid of that myself, that who wants to change comfortable life as it is? But the reality of purpose is it will always challenge us and always ask us to sacrifice things.
Right.
And we're afraid of that. And what we really often want to do is action purpose in a way that we get to keep the comfort of life as it is. And that's just not reality, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, how do you personally stay grounded when when your work constantly asks you to inspire others?
So I have a very strong, I suppose, daily practice. I get up every morning. The first thing I do before I do anything else is I journal. So I don't know whether you've heard of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And she encourages what she calls morning pages. So instead of journaling with an outcome in mind, you write whatever's in your head, three A4 foolscap pages of whatever nonsense is in your mind. Get it all out. Almost think of it as a shower for your mind. And then when I'm finished that, I meditate for 10 minutes. So I do that every day and I never break from that. It doesn't matter whether I'm in a hotel room or whether I'm at home, I do that every day. And that's a good anchor for me. But probably the most powerful thing in my life is walking. So I kind of think, what are all the different ways of contemplative practice? Like pilgrimage is something that I like. I've walked the Camino in Santiago a few times. I said to you that I've trekked in Nepal before. I make sense of my life out of walking. So again, if I'm not traveling, or even sometimes if I am, I was in London recently. I got up at 7 a.m. and went for a long walk before I spoke at an event. walking, just there's something about movement which helps my mind make sense of what I'm doing. So for me, I don't care what you do, actually. The most important thing is that you do it and you do it every day. So you are building that consistency into your life, because the anchor is not strong because you do it once a week. The anchor is strong when you do it every day. And you're also training your nervous system to expect the practice, to expect the pause, to expect the stillness. So therefore, it doesn't resist so much, because, our mind is, we want to be on our phones, we want to be distracted, we're constantly being pulled out of ourselves. And for me, any practice is about, what do I do every day? What does my body and my mind expect me to do every day? And therefore, when I feel very stressed, or when anybody else feels very stressed, we can revert into, I need to meditate for 10 minutes. I need to go for a walk for 10 minutes. I need to be in the garden for 10 minutes. We find that switch very easily. So for me, they're the most consistent practices in my life. Then I do other things like yoga and stuff like that. But the non-negotiables for me are morning pages and meditation. And then I try to walk on my own at least a couple of times a week.
Right, right. So it's more of than habit. You make it every day, and it becomes a part and parcel of your
It
life.
becomes part of your life. I don't even quite. And I suppose the analogy I use when I'm speaking to leaders is, don't make it optional. So, and I say that to them about if they need to exercise, hire a personal trainer. Don't make it optional. You have too many choices to make in your life. So the question shouldn't be in the morning is whether I will meditate or not. I just meditate. That's it. I take that choice away from myself. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what practice you do. The only practice that matters is that you actually do it.
Right, right. Fiona, if you could give your 25-year-old self one piece of advice about purpose, what would it be?
You're playing by the rules too much, Fiona. That's what I would tell her, So, and I find it interesting because I'm a natural maverick, I'm quite creative. I tend to think outside the box. I think that was one of the reasons I was quite good at my job in investment, because I was able to take what we were doing and, speak about it with investors in ways that were interesting. I was very good at forming speeches, which obviously we do now for a living, but
Right.
I was playing by the rules of life too much. And I don't mean that as in break, as I can say, there's a difference between breaking the rules and having no integrity. I think that you have to have integrity and then understand what rules to break. But I definitely was, I just think that when I look back, I'm like, you could have been more disruptive there, Fiona, in service of, I'm not disruptive for disruptive's sake, but creative and innovative and disruptive in service of us doing a better job. So something that I believe is that business is so powerful, and business has the power and the money to make a difference in the world. But that only happens through us, through the people that work in it. But that would require us to be brave enough to say, no, I think we should do it a different way. So I think I was constraining myself slightly and just not bringing myself and my ideas fully to the picture all the time, because I understood the goal. You want to be creative and innovative, but not too much that it disrupts the system too much. And I think if I was looking back now, I would say, no, you should have tried harder, just to be a little bit more, not disruptive for disruptive's sake, but disruptive in service of a better outcome.
Right, right. Fiona, perhaps the last question of today's program is,
Sure.
when you imagine the future of leadership in 2050, what excites you most and what worries you most?
What excites me most is that I think that we are going back to what you were saying earlier about, or talking about the fact that, we're in this crisis of identity because the world is changing so much. What excites me most is the opportunity that provides us with, because, whether we like it or not, we're going to be disrupted, So previously, what I would have been saying to people is, you need to disrupt yourself. But now the reality is the world is going to disrupt you. So you have this opportunity to say, okay, well, now that everything's changing, what am I going to do? And I think that is an enormous opportunity for us to turn up as different, better people that make better choices in service of our collective future. I really, really believe that. My fear is that, going back to what I was saying about, it's very easy to be pulled into the tribal wars, that will polarize us more. And that we will take the easier route, which is, I'm just going to attach myself to what these people think over there. And I think that is so dangerous, and will lead us down such a dangerous road. So this is a moment for us to say, and it's not leading, actually. So if we go down that road, we'll be in 2050 with no leaders and just a lot of followers. So this is a moment for each of us to say, this is a huge period of disruption. And who am I and who do I want to be? And to ask each of ourselves that question, who do I want to be in 2050? If it's in 2050 and I look back, who did I become? What difference did I make? What impact did I have? And how did I use my power in service of a better future for us all? So that is my wish and my dream, and it's what I want a lot of my work to do. My fear is the opposite of that, effectively.
Right. Fiona, I really wish that we continue to remain disruptors for the, larger good of society.
Yes.
And I really wish you success and good luck for all the work that you have been doing for the betterment of the societies and the leadership. Thank you once again for your time,
Thank
and
you.
it was lovely talking with you, Fiona.
Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.